Thanks, Hannah. Hi, everyone. Oh, so nice to see all of your beautiful faces in this amazing space. I would normally move around a bit more, but we've got a live stream just here, so I think I've got about this much room for manoeuvre. But if I do move and you can't hear me, just raise your hand. And so thanks for turning out. Those of you who came to see our previous speakers, thanks for staying, and thanks to everyone online. So I'm Ellen. I'm a creative business coach and consultant. I do some facilitation. I do bits of research, not the academic kind, other stuff. I'm based here in Derby. And my work is split between working with creative entrepreneurs like you guys. I also work with arts and cultural and heritage organisations on strategy and planning. And I also do some stuff in the social care and social sort of innovation space. So the sweet spot for me is kind of where creative practice and entrepreneurship and social impact kind of meet. That's where I like to spend most of my time. And what I'm going to talk about today is the importance of reflection, actually. So I've chosen someone standing on their head because I'm not going to be talking about launching into New Year's resolutions and goal setting just yet. But the importance of just using this time in January to take a bit of a pause and do some reflection in order to see what arises and start that journey ahead. So I'm going to kick off with a little bit about just where my head's at right now because it's informed my approach for this talk. And then in usual Creative Mornings style, I'm going to share a little bit about my journey and some of the lessons I've learned along the way. And then I'm going to talk about hot air balloons. And I'm going to speak for about 15 minutes, I think. So would you give me a 2-minute warning when I'm getting towards the end?
Yeah, all good.
Thank you. So, yeah, go for it. Ooh. So this image kind of sums up where my head's at. Pretty well at the moment. It's an image taken from the inside of a cave, a place called Praia de Catre in Galicia in northern Spain. I took it a couple of weeks ago. And I think it's fair to say that although we're in a new year, I definitely still feel like I'm in my cave. I'm not quite ready to burst out of hibernation. I can see the blue skies. And I'm really excited about the year ahead, but I'm just watching the kind of ebb and flow of the water at the moment, and also just a little dark around the edges, which is not unusual for me at this time of year. And I wanted to share that because I tend to see January as a time for kind of continued rest and reflection and reimagining that for me starts kind of end of December. So I start to set my intentions around then, usually around the solstice, but they're not hard and fast goals. They're just seeds of ideas of things that I might want to focus on in the year ahead. And I use this time just to keep thinking about those and to give time and space to those and just to see, what arises, what bubbles to the surface. And the new year for me starts kind of end of Feb, when it starts to get a bit warmer and I can actually see the shoots in my garden making an appearance. And actually when I look out at my garden right now, there's not much going on. And the plans are really just about preparing the ground. And that's kind of how I feel at this time of year. So I wanted to share that because that's what kind of influenced how I thought about this theme of rise. So move on. Thank you, Hannah. And part of this year, I'm coming up to like 10 years of my own business, so I've been looking back, like all the way back across my career journey. And I just wanted to share a little bit of that with you, and also to see if it might be a helpful practice for you, for those of you that have been in business for a long time, or even those of you that are just starting out. You know, we all bring a lot of experience with us, whether that's professional experience or lived experience or volunteering or whatever it might be. And I think it can be really helpful to, just spend some time thinking about that journey. How did I get here? What were some of those key moments along the way? What's bubbling up to the top when I think about that? And how can that help me think about where to focus next? So I've been kind of reimagining how I'm going to position myself, always trying to tighten up how I talk about my purpose. And that's in the kind of ever-evolving piece of creative work, always thinking about the niche, how can I make it tighter and clearer, that kind of thing. So I did an economics degree, and as many people who do that kind of thing, I started my career at a management consultancy, pretty big organisation, and I learned tons of stuff there. I started my facilitation journey there, and certainly started my consultancy journey there, but it wasn't a good fit for me, values-wise, at all. And I think I knew that going into it, but I'd already made the decision that that's where I was headed. So I stuck to my guns, but within a couple of years, I jumped ship in search for a career in the arts. And I didn't really have a sense of where that might be. I used to spend a lot of time in a gallery in Nottingham called Angel Row, which isn't there anymore, just musing on what I might do next, and thought, this looks quite cool. Maybe I could work somewhere like this. And around that time, I saw a job at the Arts Council England. So I went for that, I got that. I was totally new to arts funding. And I worked in a team that had a focus on business development, audience development, access and inclusion. And that was a really good start point for me. And I think at this point, this is when I first began to really understand and see the transformative power of the arts in terms of social impact. I used to look after the participatory arts organisations in the region here in the East Midlands, and it just blew my mind. I hadn't ever really understood that work was going on. So I think that's when the seed was sown around arts and social impact. I think that started there. But it was pretty bureaucratic. I wasn't very good at the slow pace of things. So a couple of years later, I left and went to run an Arts Council funded programme at the Prince's Trust, supporting young people into creative business. So that's where I began my kind of creative business coaching journey, and sort of working with entrepreneurs, and where I first got really interested in entrepreneurship and how we can foster that in the creative sector. And actually, I think what became really clear to me really quickly is creative people make the best entrepreneurs. I think the skill sets, the outlooks, the kind of just natural optimism and risk-taking and collaboration, it's all there. They're all really key core entrepreneurial traits. And that just was a real obvious kind of, but light bulb, I think. And I fell in love with creative entrepreneurship then. But it was a funded programme, so it came to an end after 3 years, but I continued that interest down in London at a company called Cockpit. You can look up Cockpit Studios, as they're called now. They were Cockpit Arts, and they're an incubator for makers. So I continued that coaching journey there. And we experimented with lots of different ways of supporting small creative businesses. We trialled microloans for creatives. We had kind of coaching circles and a bunch of other stuff. And it was, really great work. And I spent 7 years there. We were quite a small team, a little family. There wasn't a lot of kind of anywhere else to go apart from run the show. And I didn't want to run a building or a set of buildings. So I went to work for a very small business startup agency, and it was during that time I completed a leadership programme with the Claw Fellowship, as some of you might know that. And that really gave me time and space to think about what next, about what my drivers were, about what my ambitions were. And that's the point where I left to launch my own business. It suddenly became really clear to me that I definitely will still support creatives, but I'm also really interested in how to foster more entrepreneurship in cultural organisations, something I'm still really passionate about. And at Cockpit, one of our ambitions was to become a fully fledged social enterprise, which we achieved. So I was also really interested in what we could learn from social enterprise and how we could take some of that learning into the creative sector. And I figured that the best way to do that was running my own business, because I couldn't see that job description anywhere. I was looking. But also something rose up that had, I think, been kind of knocking on my door right since these early days at Anderson's, the company was called. We used to have to do lots of psychometric tests there so they could place you in the right place. And something that came through really strongly was the need for autonomy. And I kind of ignored it, I think, for quite a few years. I had autonomy in some of the projects, but I was still working within quite a big machine. And that reared its head again during this kind of time of reflection. And it was just so obvious to me that the best thing to do was to jump ship and do my own thing. So that's what I did, and now that's how I got here. And then next slide, thanks Hannah. And I had to really think about what are those golden threads? Where would I start? And I would really encourage you to ask yourself this question. I think as creative people, we've no shortage of ideas and opportunities. And what can also be often really tricky is honing down on where should I really focus? Where should I put my energy? How can I really define that niche in a way that's meaningful and true to myself? And I think thinking about golden threads is a really nice way of doing that. I still have several threads, so I think my portfolio is still quite broad, but it's always sharpening up. So this is just an invitation to you to have a think about that at this time of year. Maybe you're just kind of just starting out, or maybe you are reimagining things, or maybe it's time for you to go in a different direction. There will be some sort of golden threads to help guide you in that. So on to hot air balloons. I was thinking about this theme of rise and the different ways I might approach this. And actually I was reminded of a coaching tool that I use quite a bit, which is hot air balloons. So I thought, that's a nice fit. So quick show of hands, has anyone been in a hot air balloon? Well, quite a few folks, that's pretty cool. And who knows how they work? Come on, if you do, I'm sure you do. Who would like to shout out? How do hot air balloons work? Someone give me there were two hands over here.
Pressure differential.
I beg your pardon?
Pressure differential.
Yes, could you say more? Yeah, hot air, exactly. Yeah, so they have burners, the air gets heated, the air rises, but really importantly, it expands, becomes less dense, especially in relation to the air outside. There's buoyancy and we go up in the air. I know, wow, maybe our physicists can, it's slightly more complicated than that, but that's the essence. And I often do use this kind of metaphor in coaching with individuals, sometimes with organisations, when they're at the very beginning of a planning process or a strategy process, because it affords us lots of brilliant questions. Excuse me, and I think prompts us to think about expansion, which I think is a slightly more holistic way of talking about growth. It might mean scale, it might just mean moving into other areas, or perhaps developing our creative skills in a slightly different way. It doesn't necessarily need to be high growth. Those of you that are, that's perfect, but maybe you're kind of thinking about growth in a slightly different way, and I think expansion is quite a nice alternative to that. So what I wanted to do is just share two of the questions that this model throws out. There are many, but we only have 15 minutes or so. And I think they're really simple questions, but they can be really powerful, especially when they're used together. And again, there'll be an invitation just to have a think about these. And I genuinely go through this process myself. So I'm asking myself these questions right now. So I'll kind of share some of my reflections with you. So, yeah. First one, what is firing you up? What's fueling your balloon? What's enabling that hot air to rise, and what's enabling that expansion? And you can think about this in terms of your business. What's really fueling your business? You can think about it personally. What is it that's really firing me up personally? I think about both. We are people and we are also our business in most cases. So I think it's a nice holistic approach to think about both. And you can think about this in a few different ways. So on the very personal level, what energizes me? What do I find really motivating? As business owners, it's absolutely essential that we understand what motivates us and what gives us energy, what inspires us. We are the engine of our business. We have to make sure it's that fuel and that those cogs are always turning. So if you don't know what motivates you, then I would definitely suggest spending a bit of time thinking about that. I get really energized by in-person sessions, so this is really great for me. Woohoo! And I'm kind of aiming for a mix between in-person and online. Online delivery is also great. It's afforded loads of flexibility. I can work globally without having to leave my house. It's just brilliant. But it's not quite the same as meeting people and actually feeling the energy in a room like this. So that's really important for me. I'm going to name check someone who isn't here, but I'm hoping she might be on the Instagram. And it's a colleague of mine, friend actually, and colleague of mine called Philomena Rodriguez. Some of you might know her, another brilliant coach. We live down the road from each other now, which is just lush. Phil and I meet for coffee pretty regularly just to chat through ideas. What are we working on? What are we thinking about? We sometimes drag Hannah into those conversations as well. And they're genuinely really energizing. They are work. They are definitely work. We might go for a walk. We might just sit and have lunch. But really important things arise from those conversations. And I think most of us are sole traders or very small businesses. So I think making time for those interactions is super, super important. So that's definitely something that fires me up. You might think about it in terms of your skills. So maybe you've got really particular strengths that you want to dial up in the year ahead, things that you're good at, you're the best at, the places that you're making the most impact with your clients. And again, if you're not sure, you can ask them. You can ask folks what they really love about working with you. Just to give you a bit of feedback on that. You can think about what's really fueling the business. So of all the things you do, what brings you the most joy, which projects, services, products afford you the most learning opportunities, which afford the opportunities to forge new relationships or deepen existing relationships. Which ones make the most money, of course, which are the most profitable. All of these things, I think, are really important to be able to name before going into goal setting, prioritization, all that stuff. Things will rise to the surface, excuse me, which you might already be aware of. But if not, it's good to name them, lay them out, and see what that reflection is telling you. And I think it starts to encourage us to think about what we're paying attention to. I think, again, as creators and business owners, we can often fall into the trap of thinking, if only I had more time, if only I had more money. Those things are important. They are really important resources. I also think that our attention and our energy are probably our most important resources. So going through this kind of reflection can really help you hone in on what you should be paying attention to, which includes yourself and your self-care and all of that stuff that you need to really thrive. in the year ahead. I don't know who said this quote. It's attributed to a couple of different people, so I haven't credited it. If anybody knows or wants to tell me later, please do. So the flip side, what's weighing you down? What is grounding your balloon? And again, you can think about this in a few different ways. Maybe another way of thinking about this might be, what do I need to let go of? What do I need to release this year to lighten the lows and allow things to elevate? And again, it's a flip side of the same question. So you can think about this personally. Maybe there's some limiting beliefs. Maybe there are some bad habits. Maybe it's a relationship or even a person that you want to kind of have a think about. Or similarly, types of creative work, things that they're not floating your boat, they're not driving your practice forward, they're not helping you build wealth in your business. It's time to kind of clear some space. So I've been thinking about this in terms of all the different kind of work that I do. I've been really fortunate to be involved in quite a few research projects over the years to do with the creative sector and creative hubs. And I love the beginning part of a research project. I love the design and I love starting to have the conversations. I absolutely loathe the second part, the kind of writing up all of the results and playing to the various agendas of whoever's funded the work. And I find it really draining. So a couple of years ago, I decided no more research projects. And only just last week, an opportunity came in and I found myself deliberating about it. It's causing me a bit of anxiety. And as I was going through this process for this year and looking at my notes for last year, there it was in capital letters with a box around, no more research. Yeah, I remember that. Okay. So that was a quick no. And I could, crack on with the day. But there might be work that's been coming your way that you've been doing for a long time, that people know you for, but for whatever reason, it's just not serving you anymore. Don't be afraid to say no. I think if we really want to rise and elevate, we need to make space. And that can sometimes feel quite counterintuitive and a bit tricky to do when we need cash flow. We need money flowing through the business. Saying no to opportunities can feel really counterintuitive. But if you can hold your nerve and wait for the right stuff to come your way, then we're all going to, have a much better chance of achieving what we want. It does require a bit of bravery. Absolutely, and a bit of steadfastness, but I'd really, again, encourage you to have a think about that. Because I like this quote, it's by a guy called Michael Porter, so the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do. If you only take one thing away, then take this. And again, I think as creative people, there is no shortage of ideas. There's no shortage of opportunity. We could do so many things. I'm certainly guilty of spreading myself too thinly at times. And I have to be really disciplined in this process myself. When I'm going through a planning and strategy process with either an individual or a company, we get to a point where we start fleshing out the plan, and then it's time to take 20% of it out or a third of it out because there's just too much. Those initial 3 or 4 or 5 goals that all have several projects behind them or different marketing strategies or whatever, suddenly it becomes a massive, massive thing and it's too much. And again, it requires some reflection, I think, to really think about where you can really play to your strengths, what you can confidently say no to keep honing and sharpening up your offer and your positioning so that you're really doing your best work in the year that comes. How are we doing for time, Hannah?
I think to start.
Wrapping up, great. And I think these are just two questions. You can go further with this metaphor, but I think these kind of opposing questions can be really helpful. So, and I often feel like it's quite similar to the creative process in many ways. It's kind of yin and yang between kind of creation and destruction, or growth, decay, strengths, weaknesses, all of that stuff. It's a really powerful interplay, I think, and it's that space in between. If you can give time and space to it, not necessarily find all the answers, but just map out a few signals and just see what rises up. I think that's where the really breakthrough ideas and where that magic really happens, if we can just give a bit of breathing space to some of that. And as I said, sometimes in January, there's a lot of pressure to come bursting out of the starting blocks with your new plan and your new resolutions. And if you're doing that, I totally applaud you. For me, it is still midwinter, even though it's sunny outside. My internal rhythms are telling me that more stillness, please, a bit more gentleness, lots of naps. That's kind of what's going on in my practice. I'm still giving time and attention to these important questions, and I am still doing work. But I'm just just waiting to see what emerges, I guess is a nice way of saying it. And then the plans will kind of form from there. So rest and reflection, this is what January is like for me. And I think this kind of paves the way for rising up in whatever way that means to you. Look for the golden threads in your practice. Go through old notebooks. Look back at the projects that you really loved 5 years ago, 10 years ago. There'll be some little signals in there, little seeds of ideas or things that you can kind of pull out and start thinking about weaving into your practice and your business for the years ahead. What fires you, what weighs you down. See what rises up through that process. Thanks, Hannah. And I was looking for a cool quote to end with. So what I was trawling through, I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a playlist on the CreativeMornings global site, loads of songs to do with Rise. It's pretty good, actually. So I was having a look through some of those, and I was looking at Rise by Public Image Limited, and this line really stood out to me because it's actually a line from an Irish blessing, like an old Gaelic prayer. So I thought I would leave with this, or end with this really, this offering a blessing to you all, to myself as well. However you travel this year, wherever you go, balloons on the road, whatever, may the road rise up to meet you, and good luck.